France rethinks its commitment to the Sahel region of Africa. The president considers pulling out some troops a year after boosting numbers to fight armed groups. But the campaign's not going well. So, after 8 years, is it time for a new approach? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Mohammed Jamjoom. A campaign against armed groups in the Sahel in Africa has now been going on for 8 years. Soldiers from France and 5 countries of the region, Burkina Faso, Chad, Mali, Mauritania and Niger, are battling fighters linked to ISIL and Al Qaeda. But the offensive is making little headway. Regional leaders are meeting in Chad's capital in N'Djamena to discuss what to do next. French President Emmanuel Macron is joining via video link. He's considering cutting troop numbers as public opinion in France turns against the operation. Armed groups still hold large swaths of territory, and Burkina Faso's prime minister has said his government won't rule out eventually negotiating with the fighters. Ahmed Idris is monitoring developments from Lagos in Nigeria.
The mood in the region is that of concern that any potential French withdrawal will expose more communities to attacks by the armed groups. Even with the presence of 5,100 French soldiers in the Sahel, regional armies are still struggling to deal with escalating attacks from the armed groups operating in Burkina Faso, Niger and Mali. Although there are reports that Chad is trying to send in 1,000 forces to support forces in the region, a lot of people here feel that it's inadequate to deal with the situation on the ground. 2020 in particular was a violent year for both civilian and military personnel in the region. Now, with the attempt by Chad to send in 1,000 troops to support regional armies, according to some reports, many experts here believe that that wouldn't be enough. Any potential withdrawal by French forces will leave a huge vacuum. Vacuum in terms of military personnel and hardware, as well as intelligence, which the Chadian forces, although they are battle-hardened from their own civil war and fighting many battles in the region, may not have the necessary intelligence and hardware to deal with the onslaught by the armed groups in the region. Now, moving Chadian forces away from hotspots like the Lake Chad region, where regional forces are battling armed groups like Boko Haram and ISWAP, will mean that there'll be less concentration or less attention to the fight against Boko Haram and ISWAP in the Lake Chad region bordering Nigeria, Cameroon, Chad and Niger Republic, which of course will mean that the armed groups operating in that area may have a loophole to exploit in the region. Ahmed Idris reporting for Inside Story.
France has been heavily involved in military operations aimed at stabilizing the region. 1 year ago, France agreed to send hundreds of additional troops to Sahel. Since then, it's claimed a number of victories against armed groups, but critics say they haven't resulted in lasting stability. Violence has escalated in the past year. More than 7,000 people have been killed and nearly 2 million displaced by the fighting. France is now planning to reduce troop numbers and seeking broader international support to stabilize the region. All right, let's bring in our guests in Bamako, Mali. Ornella Moderan is head of the Sahel program at the Institute for Security Studies. Joining us from Accra in Ghana, Chukwuemeka is executive director of the West Africa Network for Peacebuilding. And in Yaoundé in Cameroon, Marie-Roger Biloa, president of Africa International Media Group. A warm welcome to you all. Ornella, let me start with you today. France is considering reducing its military commitment in the Sahel. Is it likely that that would be announced at this summit?
Yes, indeed. Ahead of the summit, French authorities have been making a number of declarations and statements about the possibility of, quote-unquote, adjusting their presence in the Sahel. So it's not exactly clear what this means, but it's quite likely that this could translate in a withdrawal of part of their presence, in a reduction of their military footprint in the region. An easy entry point would be to recall the 600 additional troops that were sent as backup after the post-summit last year. This, of course, would go into the notion or in the direction of a strategic readaptation of this intervention, but at the same time, at the same time, it raises questions about whether this is the right time or not, at a time when national armies remain quite vulnerable in the Sahel.
Marie-Roger, how much has French public opinion turned against France's engagement in the Sahel, and what does French President Macron want to see come out of this summit?
Okay, I don't think that much of the dissatisfaction about the presence of Barkhane in Sahel comes from French public opinion. It comes even more from Mali and from the ground, I would say. Obviously, when you have young French soldiers being killed, like what happened, what is happening many times, have been happening many times, you have questions in the press like, what are we doing there? But I think President Macron can live with it. But what is even more powerful and could lead to a change is that you have in Mali many groups protesting. You have a mounting bad atmosphere against the French troops, one must say. There was a couple of weeks ago a story of maybe Barkhane bombarding a civil wedding, and that was probably a mistake. Not sure, they are denying it, but this kind of things and the lack of results, basically the lack of results. Nobody can say today that Mali or the whole Sahel regions is safer than it was when the whole operation started 8 years ago. And even so, if things will change, if we see changes, probably we don't know in which direction, maybe not really reducing troops, because it's very difficult to reduce troops. We see the history of military operations worldwide. When you see troops coming, but for them to go away, to withdraw, it's a very difficult process. But we might see some changes because even by French standards, they don't have the result they wanted to have. And if you look at the website of the French Minister of Defense, what they have three objectives. They say Barkhane has three objectives. The first one is to fight against terrorist groups, and this has been now narrowed down to fight against a terrorist group in the area of the three borders. Okay, and now the second thing is to support the local troops, the local armies, to upscale their competences. And the third one is to help the populations. So you don't see in 8 years that major improvements have been made. And as you see, the objectives are not really results. It's like supporting, helping. You don't see a final point of the operation, even in the objective. So it can be lingering on forever. And, people we see all the means you put into it, and the results are so thin, so that something has to change.
Chukwuemeka, what are the governments in the Sahel and the people in the region expecting to see as a result of this meeting?
I think what is expected is what kind of legacy that the French government wants to leave behind in the Sahel. And I think what has become very clear is that only hardcore security cannot address the issues in the Sahel. And as the last speaker rightly pointed out, supporting the citizens to also begin to have some form of empowerment, economic empowerment, and also those key factors that increases community resilience is what is considered paramount. So because over a period of time, the hardcore security military intervention and actions has been used, and it has not yielded the needed results. And even to make matters worse is that both at the level of the UN peacekeepers and also at the level of French soldiers have lost their lives. And yet the issues continue to to be sustained rather than diminished. So I think what is important and what the 5 key countries around the Sahel will be engaging the French government on is, let us take a pause and review our actions and inactions and see whether indeed there is need to revisit or review the kind of interventions that we are making, which in my opinion goes beyond just military intervention, which has not been able to even address the primary challenge of the activities of the insurgents.
Ornella, how much of the Sahel is under the control of these armed groups, and why haven't military operations been able to get control of the situation thus far?
Well, this is a very good question. So for the past 8 years, we have seen an increasing number of our armed actors, including both national and international security forces, intervening in the Sahel region, and yet the situation keeps going worse and worse. The data we have available shows that 2020 was actually the deadliest year for civilians since the beginning of the crisis. So why is that? I think one part of the answer really has to do with the fast evolving nature of the insecurity itself. In the Sahel, you have various forms of violence and insecurity happening, and it's rather difficult to keep up with this pace and also to ensure the required level of coordination between and among defense and security forces and their international partners to face this. So this includes, of course, violent extremist groups, which have been having a constantly spreading and increasing footprint in the region, and who are the main target, in fact, of Barkhane operation. But it also includes communal violence and the rise of local militias and self-defense groups. It also includes the spiraling local conflicts that are really getting out of control and leading to increases in casualties year after year. So the situation is really quite complex, and the coordination of international and national forces is a challenge that's being addressed to some extent, but a challenge about which much remains to be done.
Marie-Roger, France is hoping to get more support from its European partners when it comes to the fight against armed groups in the Sahel. Do you think that we're going to be seeing this happen?
Well, France has been saying that for a while now, and as a matter of fact, you have some partners being there. I know the Germans to give some trainings, a very light training to Malian armies. You have those kind of things happening there, but the whole point is that you cannot solve the security issue only with military solutions. And everybody has been saying that, the Malian, even analysts, you hear that every day. But the fact is that those who have the hand in the whole operation are military. The diplomats are excluded, and they complain about it, that we think only in military terms when it comes to, establishing institutions, restoring institutions in the country. It comes to restoring also sovereignty in the country, that political problems, but they have only military solutions. And we see that today, the country, the area is not safer. What you hear now, and this pressure and the threats have been mounting, is that they are being extended to the farther south, to Cote d'Ivoire, to Mali, to even to Senegal, farther west, etc. So you don't feel like the situation has been stabilized, because only what they do, they concentrate everything about Barkhane and troops and military equipment. And when people criticize them and say, you cannot, you go through impoverished villages with your huge equipment. So what they do, they give children little things like toys, or I don't know what, some little medicines. It's like gadgets. It's not really something structured and on the long run to really help people be able at some point to tackle their own problems.
Chukwuemeka, earlier this month, Burkina Faso's prime minister said that the country is looking to start negotiations for peace with the armed groups operating in the north and east of the country. Last year, we heard the former Malian president, he had initiated similar negotiations. Are we going to see more countries adopt this strategy?
It is very likely on the long run because, like I said, the choice of just military intervention alone has not been able to address the issues. And the most important thing, in any case, is how these problems get resolved. Because I think at the end of the day, there is a dilemma of bringing armed illegal groups on the table and resolving the problem. So something has to give way for the other. And in our opinion, it is important to begin to engage in this kind of negotiations that will bring these armed groups to the table, but also bearing in mind that the state needs to show its ability to take control of its territories, and also bearing in mind that engaging the armed group might also have future effects where other armed groups believe that once they take arms against the state, they will be called to a round table. But if you also look at some of the illicit activities that is going on even within and amongst the armed group, which includes, of course, illicit money transactions and illicit funds transactions, then it may be time to also consider that option, even if it is as a carrot and stick approach to the whole issues.
Ornella, there was a report released by the International Crisis Group earlier this month that said that the Sahel stabilization strategy led by France is foundering. The report called for a course correction in France's approach. So I want to ask you, are international backers of France's approach disappointed by the results of President Macron's strategy thus far?
Well, I mean, the whole situation is fairly disappointing for Sahel populations as well as for their international partners, I think. For the past eight years, there has been considerable amounts of money, energy, and time invested in trying to stabilize the region, and results are not that convincing so far. So I don't think that the disappointment or questioning is only about the French strategy, but of course the French strategy is a core component of it. What needs to be reconsidered, as my co-debaters mentioned, is the whole approach in terms of whether or not it's possible to address the current situation with a solely or a merely, mainly, military-focused strategy, or what level of other strategies need to be blended in. There has been a recognition for a broader governance type of approach for a long time, but this isn't really translating into results yet. Another element, perhaps, that we really should start considering more is the way in which different types of violence interact. So, adopting a strategy like dialogue with violent extremist groups could perhaps help solve that part of the problem. But arguably, it wouldn't do much about the communal violence dimension or about the growth of local militias, which is also a key element, and which in fact resulted in more death of civilians last year than terror groups themselves.
Marie-Roger, in an earlier answer, you mentioned something that I wanted to ask you a little bit more about. You mentioned the fact that the French foreign minister had just recently called for a diplomatic, political, and development surge to respond to the situation in the Sahel. So I wanted to dig a little bit deeper and ask you, what more would that entail? Because there are many who believe that, a military strategy on its own is not enough. That there should be this overall strategy that includes governance, human rights issues, fiscal reforms. What do you say to all that?
Okay, the foreign ministry is just reflecting the global, I would say the common sense now around the Barkhane and the G5 Sahel and also the whole operation, because 8 years with terror expanding and the country near to collapse, actually, there is something to be done. So what is at stake here is that they don't want to look changing, switching too much their position. So, but they still open a little bit. They open the door. I mean, just a couple of months ago, nobody wanted to acknowledge that a course change was necessary. But now, there was a coup in Mali with President Ibeka, who was, they said he resigned, okay? He left. And now you have, again, yet another military junta there, so which doesn't say anything good about the institutions in Mali now. So you have the situation which has been worsening. So the French, what they want now is sort of look for a new input, a new, I would say, a new incitement to go into it and open up to other actors, sort of. And with retaining the lead, they want very much to retain the lead, and that has been the problem. Although it's very difficult, we know that when you have many troops working together, it's very difficult not to have really a leader. It's difficult to coordinate. So for the sake of efficiency, they want to be a united front, a united leadership. So you have that. But you cannot go on thinking that the Mali or the Sahel armies are not fit to lead the fight against what they call terror, and just say we have to do it by ourselves, and we don't need to listen to the people, because the French obsession for terrorism, the fight against terrorism, people have another approach of the issue. They are the people, the terrorists there. You have all kinds of people. You have thugs, you have international crime, but you have also people who know their families, people who are linked to each other. So it's not you just say they are terrorists, and we just go against them without taking into account the whole.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. It's just that we're just about to run out of time, and I just want to look at another aspect of all that's going on in the Sahel. So, Chukwuemeka, I want to ask you, the conflict in the Sahel, obviously it has sparked a major humanitarian crisis. Could you just tell our viewers a little bit about how dire the situation is right now?
It is extremely very, very, very challenging, especially given the fact that most of the Sahel countries are now even unable to cope with the economic hardship that is imposed, partly because of the conflict, and now even made more manifest because of the current pandemic. And the greatest hit of all this are the women, who continue to suffer from the brunt of the conflict. And yet, if you look at the future of the Sahel, whether it's at the level of food insecurity or at the level of enhanced economic empowerment, you know that the situation is precarious. And that's why we continue to insist that while looking in the direction of military might, it is important to begin now to develop activities that will ensure resilience of the community and also make them more and more sophisticated against the insurgency and the conflict that is going on in the Sahel.
All right, we've run out of time, so we're going to have to leave the conversation there. Thank you so much to all our guests, Ornella, Moderan, Chukwuemeka Eze, and Marie-Roger Biloa. And thank you, too, for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Mohammed Jamjoom, and the whole team here, bye for now.